Okay. Now, what were you saying there, Julie?
Um, actually, let me pull up my notes.
Okay.
Um, three universal truths: Anika, impermanent, everything changes.
Okay.
Is one of the three universal truths of Buddhism.
Okay. Enlighten us.
Um,
Hmm.
huh,
Uh-oh.
I'm thinking
Oh, jeez.
you should be scared. This could
Uh-oh.
get interesting. I'm sorry, I'm hyper.
Oh, boy. This is going to be fun today. Um, so,
Oh,
so one of the three universal truths is that nothing is permanent, right?
yeah.
There's no permanence. So that everything is always in emotion. Everything is always in a a mode of change. Okay.
It
So
it speaks to basically in summary, basically everything in the universe changes. There's
okay.
nothing outside of that change, kind of a thing.
All
And
right.
so it leans a lot into a lot of Taoist concepts as well.
Okay. So what is the Dallas concept on that? On change?
That the Tao consists of changes.
The Tao consists of change. That's
It's
really
always
a
moving. It doesn't stay consistent in itself.
okay. So all right, true enough. So nothing stays the same. That is true. That is a truth. So in that, so we're saying that there's an ebb. I
Well,
get
also, there's another one of the three universal truths is anatta, which means no self or ego. But if you take a look at like some of the examples of self, there's this thought of like what actually is permanent within that.
so what would be permanent other than just the person?
Um, I don't think that's knowable because almost every aspect of a person in attributes changes.
Yeah. So would that go upon also the physics law of with every action there is a reaction, or with every like change to not change, the resistance to change would
That
be its
there is a constant motion of things popping up and causing other things to change, and a continuous cycle of that.
okay. So it sounds like one has a choice in
Either accepting it or not.
right. And if one is accepting of the change, whether it be everything from spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, and also the environment around them, then there needs to be an acceptance with that change. But it all starts with our thoughts, right? And concept or perspective and that understanding. If I'm on if I'm on the same page with
I
what you
think that understanding plays a part in the acceptance. I mean, there's certain beliefs that can be made around or in a an effect of the information that everything changes.
What we do,
Some people try to look for a consistency of something that doesn't change in that.
okay.
Other people don't, and they just accept that everything changes.
Well, okay. So which would be the more productive? The acceptance of that change is inevitable, or the permanence, which is what is familiar, which is where one stays. So there's a choice in this,
I
right?
wonder if some of that has to do with the comfort of the person in response to the change.
Well, yeah, because that if one stays with what is familiar, because it's what they know, then they're more likely to stay with it because there is no discomfort. But yet, eventually, there can become discomfort in not changing because there's a relationship with it. You have a relationship with yourself in that. That if you have your ego, which has two parts, right? The one that has pride, and that can be a productive pride or a self or a pride that says, look at me, arrogance. Or you have a pride that is fragile, of that I will do what I need to do to protect that. So, and I might be off on this, if somebody can, if somebody knows better than me on this one, then sure, go ahead. But I think I'm pretty close on this one. That we don't want to change because of what our lives and our environments and the environments we are and have been in are familiar. Okay. So, but change is going to happen. Even in those environments, things are going to change. Uh, like, for example, Xenon was saying that, you know, somebody said, hey, I've got a futon y'all can have, right? Well, her environment had changed due to having, them bringing a futon into the house. Okay. That is change in the environment. So nothing is permanent. There's always impermanence. And that we can be resistant to that. Because who wants to change what they know? With, after all, it's working for us, right? Or at least we think it's working for us.
What's also interesting is the other universal truth that I hadn't mentioned yet is
Mm-hmm.
dukkha, and it's about their suffering in life. Everything suffers. It's from discomfort, dissatisfaction, all this stuff with
Mm-hmm.
not actually like accepting the first universal truth I mentioned, which was the impermanence and the change.
Okay. So could you read that again? I'm sorry. Hang on.
Um,
Hang on a second. Hold up. Sorry about that. I've got a dog he's trying to, he's got something that he wants, and I think he wants to go back outside, but that's not going to happen right now. So, okay. So,
so dukkha means all beings suffer in life. Their suffering is caused by discomfort, dissatisfaction, all those things that With anicca, which is impermanence and everything changes, it's the
Mhm.
not acceptance of that.
Okay, yeah. So would we say, or could one say that the discomfort comes in the change, or the discomfort?
It comes from an aversion to the change.
Okay. So the aversion could be either way though, right?
It can
You're
be basically any kind of negative feelings toward it.
okay, which would make or cause somebody to not want to change because of the discomfort of the change.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was a quote, and I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but when I was in Alcoholics Anonymous a number of years back, somebody that was a sponsor of mine told me that one can grow or one can choose to not grow. Pain, either way, pain is inevitable. And that it took me a bit to understand that, and that pain is inevitable and we can choose to change or not. We have a choice to go, all right, do I want to get better and change and grow, or do I want to stay where I am and this misery that comes with it? You know, either way, you have a choice, but you're going to be uncomfortable either way, either with whatever you're doing that you're getting, you know, your fix or your high on, or you're going to have to undergo the discomforts of the growth. Either way, because when you grow, you're going to have to find out some truths that are uncomfortable for to deal with. Okay, to the reasons why either A, you don't want to grow, B, what caused you to stay where you are, and C, how come you're unwilling to change. And that in that there's going to be, with resistance, there's going to be discomfort because it's going to be opposing something. And that in this case, one of the three truths, one of the three universal truths is change, right?
Yep.
So, and some people are more prone to, due to whatever reason, may be due to, say, what they've grown up to know, what they've grown to know in their lives, which has been a fixture in their lives, or say maybe there is something that is a affliction, a dysfunction, or something in there medically, mentally, or emotionally in some way that they're born with that might cause some resistance, even though the person wants to. Okay. So there's discomfort either way in any of that, because I know, for example, and this isn't to pick on anybody when I say this, is that I know people in the spectrum of autism that it takes more to get a change to happen because of the focus, the routine. what one becomes accustomed to, right? So in that, change can happen, but it's a longer process. And that a changing of one's habits over time versus the routine or with the routine, which adjustment period. And so that might have to happen slower in order for the adjustments. But yet, if somebody who has environmentally grown up with something that they've had to grow into, what the culture is of where they grew up, or maybe that whatever part of the country, or whatever, wherever, geographically they grew up, that it's in that culture maybe to only be this way in order to fit in. Or maybe it's just the people they're around, which in some way enable that lack of change. And so with that, one can go, well, if I do this, what might happen if I do change? Will I lose everything? Or will these people still see me as a friend? Or will they respect me more? So one has that internal struggle that goes with it. And yet there's going to be discomfort either way. And then if one has just from day one grown up in that environment, that culture, that way of life, then that's all they know versus what they've come to know. So there's going to need to be a change either way. Maybe where they're at isn't as productive. And that maybe finding a different way is productive. But that discomfort is that impermanence is always going to be there. Nothing is permanent unless we choose to stay there. It's like the guy in who was the football star in high school. He's always staying there and always reliving that in his mind. He hasn't left that time of when he was great.
But in that's a belief about consistency in a world of change.
Right.
So that's not necessarily the reality of what it is or accepting that change. It is creating a belief to have some sort of stability within that change, trying to convince yourself that there is something permanent.
Right. And that recognition of that, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So either way, there's going to be discomfort. So maybe what that guy was telling me was one of those universal truths, just in a different way. You can change or you can't, but either way,
Change
pain
is
is
going to happen. There's going to be pain. There's going to be, like, you can decide whether or not you want to suffer through the discomfort of not accepting it.
It's like a broken leg. You have a fracture and it needs to be reset, but you keep going the way you are, and that injury that's healed wrong causes pain. Okay. And maybe your body will adjust. Or you can go in and have surgery to get it straightened out, and that recovery from that bone or joint being put back together and corrected, there's going to be discomfort there also. So change has to happen. Something will cause the change to happen due to maybe an unfortunate event, personal experience, or possibly that it needs to happen. And we can run from it, which to keep where we want to stay because it's what we know due to maybe our own personal beliefs and whatever we seek to stay there because it's comfortable, or maybe because it fits what our ideals are, maybe our agenda, and maybe our narratives that help us stay in. And
Or
that,
to a narrative or something that was said to you that you thought was permanent, and then you realize, oh, there's just change.
yeah, there is. And that what maybe that person taught you was a falsehood, right? But it sounded good enough
to
to be,
get some temporary peace in a world of change, but then it's like this, yeah.
yeah. So you're fitting something to,
Or an attempt at peace, at
yeah,
least.
or an attempt or to stay comfortable because the reality is that the truth be, you can't be this way, but you can run from it as long as you want. But either way, it's going to catch up. The universe is going to change with or without you. It's your choice to change with or without, change with it or resist it. It's up to you. We were born with free will. We were born with brains and the ability to make conscious decisions, despite what the information given to us is. Or we can choose to ignore it. Either way, you've chosen. Now, do you want to stay with it? Stay where you are? And maybe cause pain to others in the process? Or do you want to just suffer alone? And maybe live with that falsehood that you were told, which avoids the reality of what actually is. It's your choice. So in that, now let's move on to like one of those other universal truths. Okay, come on, guys. Come on, let's go outside. Come on. Come on. So, okay, now let's go to one of the other truths that you have.
Okay. Anatta, which means no self, no ego.
Okay. So how would that apply to change? How could we?
I have a story.
Okay.
So I was told that I was supposed to identify as a certain thing.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically religiously.
Okay.
And that was then my identity.
Okay.
But the thing is, I always had little beliefs somewhat outside of it.
Okay.
That didn't quite mix.
Okay.
With what was being told to me.
Okay. So that was conditional.
Yes. And so I had held on to the belief, even when it wasn't the belief, it was the identity, but I was convinced that that identity was something that I had to have despite not sharing in the beliefs that were core to that identity.
So it sounded almost like an absolute. Either you are going to be or you're not going to be.
It was more of it's an expectation that you need to be this way.
You should and are and is.
And then there was some convincing that, hey, you are this, but it was never explained to me, oh, but you have to have these beliefs to actually be this.
So it was just take it in blind faith.
Something like that.
Okay, just take it blindly.
At first, yeah.
Okay. But
But
in
in that, I still had that identity in that of not changing what I said with that identity, even though I didn't have the beliefs with it. And I was, for a while, kind of attached to it, even because that was a sense of belonging, even though
okay.
I wasn't necessarily that.
So acceptance and the attachment because of familiarity, comfort.
Yeah.
Okay. So that goes back to the first law of that we will stay attached. We
It's
can't.
universal truth,
Right.
that there is impermanence. So
No.
I wasn't given the chance to really have a space where I actually could openly explore beliefs, or anything. I was expected to believe a certain thing,
Okay.
but I was never told what that specifically was, but that I had to have a certain identity with it.
Oh, okay. All right. So there was a limitation of something that might cause,
There was an expectation.
okay, to only stay with this information given and that nothing else is going to give you this truth other than what you're doing right now with this study or with this group, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the restriction of outside information to challenge the thought.
Yes.
That's kind of messed up. That sounds very,
Well, I wasn't allowed to read a lot of books because they had wizards in it, or they were about other gods or something like that.
well, funny that, you know, there's always a truth, some bit of truth in those stories, okay? Whether it be metaphorical that lended itself to the truth for someone for it to become palatable to absorb or relate to, but yet the restriction to fit that narrative, right?
Mhm.
That this is all there is. Okay. Well,
And
and
so, starting to step away from that, it was like, this is kind of surprising. The world is not what I expected it to be.
now let me ask, was there information that was told to you or in your own research that challenged that information, that challenged that meaning?
Okay, so I was basically taught that I was supposed to believe certain beliefs or something, but I never
Mm-hmm.
like entirely got that
Right.
and
Okay.
I had read the religious text for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of had a different interpretation of what that meant.
Okay.
And then things started getting confusing
Okay.
because it was like, I read that book and you're saying something completely different. And I don't understand what's going on here. And then it's like moving away from that, and it's like there were a lot of like subliminal stuff that was just like introduced at certain times, that some of my beliefs that were just because I was in a state where I was easily acceptable to him.
Okay. Yeah. It was to be accepted. Uh, it was to be accepted in.
As part of the group.
Right. Right. So you had to be a part of that, even though it was not realistic to stay there. Then it was not realistic to be with that.
It kind of was pushed as if belief wasn't necessarily a choice, it was an obligation.
Ah.
And then it was, okay, I'm sort of accepting of these beliefs, but I have different beliefs than the group, kind of a thing.
So back again to conditional.
Yeah.
All right. Huh.
And then I'm having to take time that it's like I'm having to learn things that I probably should have known a long time ago.
Well, but that, and you saying that, is that because of what that group believed, or was it because there was a hesitation of that if I don't?
I had a hesitation on accepting certain things because of the group beliefs and what was being preached at the time.
Okay.
And then other things were just not taught.
Oh, so information left out just to keep things in
And then
the.
some things were just completely lied about to get me to believe things.
Okay, so it was a manipulated or a omittance
And
of.
now it's like there's a lot of change going on, and it's like, okay, for the past few weeks, I'm like, am I going to accept this change? Kind of a thing with
All
a
right.
bunch of different stuff. And
So what you had learned caused a change.
but in that, the wrestling with it
Uh-huh.
had caused a bit of turmoil.
Right. Huh. So the internal struggle was from.
The resistance to immediately accepting said change.
Okay, because it challenged and it went against.
It challenged everything that I had been taught.
Okay. So something else was presented
Mm-hmm. So
that
it's looking at it from a different perspective.
other than what was the conditioned or working to condition one to believe as an absolute.
Yeah.
Okay. The flexibility to be able to learn and change, to enact change, in other words.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that because people will say and do things or say things to keep us in a way
Resistant to change.
that because it's comfortable for them.
Hmm.
Okay. It's their ideal because it's what they want.
Just stick everybody in a little box.
Keep everything in that neat little
In
box.
in that organized manner. Just organize all your boxes. Everyone stay in their box.
So now, say one of the boxes isn't quite strong enough and ends up giving, which nothing's perfect. And the person that has an idea of there's something else, then from there goes, hey, guess what? I'm going to hatch out of this one area I'm in to I feel the need to explore this in order to expand. Has anybody ever seen or seen what happens with a hermit crab?
They get too big for their shells and then they have to find a new home.
And so in that time that they're looking for a new shell that's big enough, that they are vulnerable in that period of time because they don't have that shell to retract into. And so they're at the mercy of what's around them, a predator. Okay. And in this case, that in that change, one can become vulnerable because your thoughts are still open. And that there is and can be a state of confusion, which would make us vulnerable to something that needed to happen. So it sounds to me like we're gonna have to make another part of this next week. This is going to be like a multi-part probably. So
It's a lot to talk about.
this is because especially right now in the environment that's going on, everybody is going to be undergoing a change, and that habits and ideals are going to be changing for a lot of people, you, me, and anyone else included. And hopefully some of them are for the better, I would like to think, and that some people are going to be upset, which is fine. There's always going to be a disruption with change. But however, when that change causes productivity, then and it proves to be beneficial for the greater, then it's worth the change. It's worth going through. So let's see, what time is it now? That's 4 o'clock. Okay. That from there, we have the choice again of we can choose or not to, but yet pain is still going to be inevitable. So from this point, let's pick this up again next week. And because this is going to be a good discussion that can be carried on. So let's call it time on this one, and then next week we'll pick it up. So thanks, everybody. And that, all right. So let me leave everybody with a thought. Who listens and hears and maybe saves this for another time of listening. That in this time of unrest, in this time of the climate and people's ways of life are going to be changed. Think about what it's worth, not for yourself, but for what's greater than you. And where things are going to flourish. I'm going to leave everybody with that. So thank you, everybody, for being here, and that those that listen, I appreciate it. And for that, have a good day, a good evening, and a good morning. Tal Griffin,